Hi everyone, welcome to this week's assembly, which as you can see is on social media. As some of you may know, I love technology and I use social media a lot. But I recently watched a documentary on Netflix that really changed my views on how I interact with technology. And I wanted to share some of what I've learnt with you in this assembly. The quote below that nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse basically points to the fact that technology is massive in our lives, and our use of it and how closely connected we are to it will only get bigger. But as well as providing great benefits, there's always some downsides. It's those downsides which we're going to explore today. But rather than seeing this from a parent or teacher position, which I know can be boring, this assembly comes from the knowledge of the very people who created the technologies and social media that we all use, the people that invented it. I want you to imagine walking into a room, a control room with a bunch of people hunched over a desk with little dials, and that control room will shape your thoughts and feelings for the whole day. This might sound like science fiction, but this actually exists right now today. Next, I want you to imagine that same room with 100 people hunched over that desk with more dials, switches and controls that will shape the thoughts and feelings of 1 billion people. This too might also sound like science fiction, but this also exists right now and it's happening to all of us. At Google, there is a job role called a design ethicist where they study how to ethically steer people's thoughts. And there are also the same sort of people in a handful of technology companies, including Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Apple, that through their choices will steer what you and 1 billion other people are thinking today. The guy you see on screen now is called Tristan Harris, and he was one of those people whose job it was to find ways to actually get users of social media to become more addicted to their phones. He and many people like them study how to keep you looking at your phone screen for longer, and they use cutting-edge behavioural and brain science to do it. When you pull out your phone and look at your social media feed, they are scheduling little blocks of time in our minds. If you see a notification, it schedules you to have thoughts that maybe you didn't intend to have. If you swipe over that notification, it schedules you into spending a little bit of time getting sucked into something that maybe you didn't intend to get sucked into. When we talk about technology, we tend to talk about it as this amazing opportunity, and it could go in any direction. It can help us do amazing things from self-driving cars, cashless payments, robots that can take all the boring tasks away from our lives, artificial intelligence, 5G, facial recognition, and so much more. But, and this is a very important but, it's going in a very specific direction because it's not evolving randomly. There's a hidden goal driving the direction of all the technology that these companies make. And that goal is the race for our attention, a race for capturing your time. Because every news site, shop, election, politicians, games, even apps have to compete for one thing, which is our attention. And there's only so much of it. And the best way to get people's attention is to know how someone's mind works. And there's a whole bunch of persuasive techniques that are learned in college or at a lab called the Persuasive Technology Lab to get people's attention. Some examples are on the screen now. A simple example is YouTube. YouTube wants to maximize the amount of time you spend watching video on YouTube. And so what do? They autoplay the next video. And let's say that works really well. They're getting a little bit more of your time. Well, if you're Netflix, you look at that and say, well, that's shrinking my market share. So I'm going to autoplay the next episode. But then if you're Facebook, you say, that's shrinking all of my market share. So now I have to autoplay all the videos in the news feed before waiting for you to click play. So the internet is not evolving at random. The reason it feels like it's sucking us in the way it is because of this race for your attention. We know where this is going. Technology is not neutral, and it becomes this race to the bottom of the brainstem of which company can go lower and compete harder and design the best technology to get your attention. Let me give you another example of Snapchat. Snapchat is the #1 way that a teenager in the UK communicate, and there's millions of you that use it. And as you know, they invented a feature called Snap Streaks, which shows the number of days in a row that two people have communicated with each other. In other words, what they just did is gave two people something they don't want to lose. Because if you're a teenager and you have 150 days in a row, you don't want to lose that. You don't want that to go away. And so it becomes highly addictive and something that you have a reason to keep on doing. We have a temptation to think about this as, oh, you're just using Snapchat the same way we used to gossip on the telephone. It's probably okay. Well, what that misses is that in the 1970s, when people were just gossiping on the telephone, there wasn't 100 engineers on the other side of the screen who knew exactly how your psychology worked and orchestrated and manipulated you into this sort of behaviour with each other. They're manipulating you to eat up your time, doing something you wouldn't normally do, and to some extent can't control. This is so well known amongst the tech industry that many of the top tech company bosses don't allow their children to use social media. In fact, a 2017 survey conducted by the Silicon Valley Community Foundation found among 907 Silicon Valley employees with kids that despite high confidence in technology's benefits, many of those parents now have serious concerns about the tech's impact on their kids' psychological and social development. Watch this video of how Tristan Harris describes how the tactics are used by social media companies to get you to become more addicted to your screen.
As I say in the film, it's like we're bringing this ancient brain hardware, the prefrontal cortex, which is like what you use to do goal-directed action, self-control, willpower, holding back. Marshmallow test. Don't get the marshmallow now. Wait later for the 2 marshmallows later. All of that is through our prefrontal cortex. And when you're sitting there and you think, okay, I'm going to look at this one thing on Facebook because my friend invited me to this event, or it's this one post I have to look at. And the next thing you know, you find yourself scrolling through the thing for like an hour.
Right. And
you say, man, that was on me. I should have had more self-control. But there, behind the screen, behind that glass slab, is like a supercomputer pointed at your brain that is predicting the perfect thing to show you next. And you can feel it. So this is really important. So like, if I'm Facebook, and when you flick your finger, you think when you're using Facebook, it's just going to show me the next thing that my friend said. But it's not doing that. When you flick your finger, it actually literally wakes up this sort of supercomputer avatar voodoo doll version of Joe. And the voodoo doll of Joe is, the more clicks you've ever made on Facebook is like adding the little hair to the voodoo doll. And the more likes you've ever made adds little clothing to the voodoo doll. And the more watch time on videos you've ever had adds little shoes to the voodoo doll. So the voodoo doll is getting more and more accurate the more things you click on. This is in the film, The Social Dilemma. Like, right. If you notice, like the character, as he's using this thing, it builds a more and more accurate model that the 3 AIs behind the screen are kind of manipulating. And the idea is it can actually predict and prick the voodoo doll with this video or that post from your friends or this other thing, and it'll figure out the right thing to show you that it knows will keep you there because it's already seen how that same video or that same post has kept 200 million other voodoo dolls there because you just look like another voodoo doll. So here's an example. And this works the same on all the platforms. If you were a teen girl and you opened a dieting video on YouTube, 70% of YouTube's watch time comes from the recommendations on the right-hand side, right? So the things that are showing recommended videos next. And it will show you, what did it show that the girls who watched the teen dieting video? It showed anorexia videos because those were better at keeping the teen girls' attention. Not because it said these are good for them, these are helpful for them. It just says these tend to work at keeping their attention. So again,
these tend to work if you are already watching diet videos?
Yeah. So if you're a 13-year-old girl and you watch a diet video, YouTube wakes up its voodoo doll version of that girl and says, hey, I've got like 100 million other voodoo dolls of 13-year-old girls, mm-hmm. right? And they all tend to watch these other videos. I don't know I just know that they have this word thinspiration is the name for it,
really?
To be inspired for anorexia. Yeah, it's a real thing. YouTube addressed this problem a couple years ago, but when you let the machine run blind, all it's doing is picking stuff that's engaging.
Why did they choose to not let the machine run blind with one thing, like anorexia?
Well, so now we're getting into the Twitter censorship conversation and the moderation conversation. So this is why I don't focus on censorship and moderation, because the real issue is if you blur your eyes and zoom way out and say, how does the whole machine tend to operate? Like, no matter what I start with, what is it going to recommend next? So, if you started with, a World War II video, YouTube would recommend a bunch of Holocaust denial videos, right? If you started teen girls with a dieting video, it would recommend these anorexia videos. In Facebook's case, if you joined, there's so many different examples here because Facebook recommends groups to people based on what it thinks is most engaging for you. So if you were a new mom, you had Renee DiResta, my friend, on this podcast. We've done a bunch of work together, and she has this great example of, as a new mom, she joined one Facebook group for mothers who do it yourself baby food, like organic baby food. And then Facebook has this sidebar. It says, here's some other groups you might recommend, you might want to join. And what do you think was the most engaging of those? Because Facebook, again, is picking on which group, if I got you to join it, would cause you to spend the most time here, right? So for some do-it-yourself baby food groups, which group do you think it selected?
Probably something about vaccines.
Exactly. So
Really?
anti-vaccines for moms. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So then if you join that group, now it does the same, runs the process again. So now look at Facebook. So it says, hey, I've got these voodoo dolls. I've got like 100 million voodoo dolls, and they just joined this anti-vaccine moms group. And then what do they tend to engage with for a very long time if I get them to join these other groups? Which of those other groups would show up?
I don't know.
Chemtrails,
Oh, okay.
Pizzagate,
Flat Earth?
Flat Earth, absolutely. Yep. And YouTube recommended, so I'm interchangeably going from YouTube to Facebook because it's the same dynamic. They're competing for attention, and YouTube recommended Flat Earth conspiracy theories hundreds of millions of times. And so when you're a parent during COVID and you sit your kids in front of YouTube because you're like, this is the digital pacifier, got to let them do their thing, I got to do work.
Right.
And then you come back to the dinner table and your kid says, the Holocaust didn't happen and the earth is flat. And people are wondering why. It's because of this.
Now, if this is making you feel a little outrage, notice that thought just comes over you. Outrage is a really good way of also getting your attention, because we don't choose to be outraged. It's an emotion. It happens to us as a result of something. And if you're the Instagram newsfeed, whether you'd want to or not, you actually benefit when there's outrage, because outrage doesn't just schedule a reaction in emotional time space for you. We want to share that outrage with other people. So we want to hit share and say, can you believe the thing that they said? And so outrage works really well at getting our attention. Such that if Instagram had a choice between showing you an outrage feed and a calm news feed, they'd want to show you the outrage feed, not because someone consciously chose that, but because that worked better at getting your attention. So how do we fix this? Well, we need to make some radical changes to technology and to our society. The first is we need to acknowledge that we're very easily persuadable. Once you start understanding that your mind can be scheduled into having little thoughts or little blocks of time that you didn't choose, and that businesses are paying social media companies to do this, wouldn't we want to use that understanding and protect against the way that that happens? We need to see ourselves fundamentally in a new way. It's almost like a new period of human history, becoming self-aware that we can be easily persuaded, and that our time and our ability to choose how we spend it needs to be protected. We need to value time where we can truly switch off. But these times are few and far between. With phones in our pockets, we never have the chance to get bored. If we sit at the bus stop, we don't just sit and let our minds wander. We immediately get out our phone and look at our social media feed. Our ability to be creative is being taken away. Our ability to have new ideas and solve problems in our lives is being taken away. It's no wonder there's a higher proportion of people who report feeling more anxious. So what are some of the things that you can do right now to start grabbing your time back? The first is to become aware of how your time is being sucked, hunted by social media companies. Secondly, don't click on videos or posts that are recommended to you or are clickbait. Always choose something that you're interested in finding out about rather than letting the tech company's algorithm choose for you. Thirdly, turn off notifications so that you're not tempted to look every time a new notification pings at you. Instead, you decide the moments when you'll look at your phone. Uninstall apps that you don't use or you're noticing are wasting your time. Only have the apps which are most important to you. Don't leave your device in your bedroom at night and schedule your own downtime so you have a couple of hours in the evening spending time with your family. And lastly, use screen time on your phones to set your own time limits on apps so you decide how much time you use on them, not the tech companies. Social media can be a great tool to figuring out your passions and finding your purpose, just enjoying yourself or your connections. This is not an assembly about deleting social media altogether from your life. It's about building awareness of how powerful it can be and how it's designed to take your time away from you. It's about achieving balance between your life on screen and your life away from screen. Thanks everyone. Now it's time for me to go.